Well, my family connection from my grandfather, he was a friend of the Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. He was the also notorious friend of Adolf Hitler, who conspired with Adolf Hitler on the destruction of the Jewish people in the Middle East. And, in fact, many people think that Islamic fundamentalism originated just a recent origin, but we had our Osama bin Laden of Hajj Amin al-Husseini, who called on the destruction of all Jews wherever you find them, in accordance to the way he interpreted the Quran. Kill them wherever you find them. And you can see him in the footage, you can see his picture, you can see he also started the Khandar troops, the Bosnian SS troops, one of the 8 divisions of Nazi Germany's war machine. And you can also see him saluting Hitler with the Heil Hitler. So it is, and I learned this from a family background. And my grandfather also sold land to the Jewish people. He was going to be killed by Hajj Amin al-Husseini and Abdul Qadir al-Husseini for his so-called collaboration with the Jews, because he sold land to Jewish immigrants.
Now, would you, growing up as a child, have been a typical Palestinian, would you?
Yes, sir.
And how would you describe a typical Palestinian growing up when you were a child?
Well, we got our education system from the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan prior to the 6 Days War. And I remember in kindergarten, my first song I sang every morning with the rest of the school children was Arabs are beloved and Jews are dogs. And all the way to high school, the education system was very anti-Semitic, which called for the destructions of the Jews. This is why you see today Muslim Palestinian suicide bomber. You will never see a Palestinian Christian who's a suicide bomber.
So is it a hatred of the Israeli army and the occupation, or is it an ancient hatred of Jews?
Well, I mean, it's an ancient hatred of Jews, but the term occupation, I mean, this has been used all the time, occupation. Well, the Jews in reality liberated the Holy Land. They didn't occupy it. King Hussein occupied it. There is only 2 nations in the world who recognize Jordan's occupation of Judea, the West Bank. And the Israelis came and they preempted an attack by the Arabs. I remember us clamoring behind Jamal Abdel Nasser, calling for the destruction of the Jews in Israel.
Now, at what point in your life did you believe that there may be more than one side to the story?
1993, I started doing research. I started asking questions to my family. I made a trip to Israel, and I saw firsthand how we treated Jewish people who lived in Israel. I had a spiritual journey, if you will. I looked into all religions. I looked into the Bible and into the Quran. And what I saw in the Bible, that the Jewish people have always been in self-defense from the eons of time regarding this land, in self-defense. And in the way I was brought up in Islamic theology, that when the Jews come back to the land, the Muslims and the nations round about will attack Israel, and then the stones will cry out, the trees will cry out, there's a Jew hiding behind me. Come, O Muslim, come, O slave of Allah, come and kill him. And this is in fact what has been taught throughout the Middle East. So I saw that the Jewish people are in self-defense. And indeed, I saw the Jewish people as the refugee problem.
Did you openly express them?
Yes, I openly started asking questions. Of course, I was rejected by my family. It's apparently a repeated lie becomes a fact. And I started learning this. And this is what Nazism taught, that you repeat the lie so many times, it becomes a fact. And I saw parallels of my education to Nazi Germany. In fact, this is exactly what you see. You see what is a kind of a Nazism revived with a religious twist called Islamic fanaticism. So I started asking my family question and documenting. I said, wait a minute, my grandfather sold land to the Jews. Yes, Arafat's uncle sold land to the Jews, Tahir al-Husseini. Gaza was sold to the Jews for £1,000. The mayors of Jerusalem sold land to the Jews. Most of the land was acquired by
Had you at any stage in your youth an association with the PLO?
Yes, my association with the PLO. After going to school for so many years, learning anti-Semitism, hating Jews without even meeting them or speaking to them, carried out a terrorist attack on the bank Leumi Israel in Bethlehem and nearly lynching an Israeli official in our village. And I ended up in prison, the Muscovite prison in Jerusalem. This hatred never ended. All the way when I came to America, I was still affiliated with helping the PLO for funds. And then I got involved with an Islamic movement, which had its affiliation with Azzam, who is the founder of Al-Qaeda. So, all my life, my idea of salvation was basically self-destructing myself. I had a cousin of me, I had relatives of mine die in the process of trying to kill Jewish people.
Suicide bombers, yeah?
Yes, and one of my cousins died on his way to Ben Yehuda Street. He got shot by the Israelis, and of course, the media stated that the Israelis took his body parts and sold in the black market, and all kinds of lies like this. We accused them of blood libel, all kinds of fabrications that were created. When I worked in the Loop College in Chicago, I remember my translation work. I would change the English to suit the American audience, inviting them for Palestinian parties, for we call them cultural parties, invited for baklava and lamb, when in reality we were raising funds for the PLO. The basic question I had was, how come that the land of Judea, or the Holy Land, was never in question regarding it becoming an Arab Palestinian state until 1967. The Palestinian Charter, prior to 1967, did not include that land as Palestine. In fact, Gaza belonged to Egypt, and Judea, that land, was under the King Hussein government, the Hashemite kingdom. And there was no problems. They had no qualms with it being a Hashemite kingdom until 1967. So all of a sudden, overnight, I became a Palestinian. And when I was a young kid, I was a Jordanian. My father was a Jordanian. He served in the Jordanian army. And there was no this outcry for a Palestinian state in Judea. The outcry of a Palestinian state was in 1948 land. So why all of a sudden people rises up